Hello, everyone. First, I'm Frances with the Early Childhood Council. I'm a mental health consultant, and I'll let my other coworkers introduce themselves.
Hi,
Hi, sorry, Deb.
that's fine. Go ahead, Catherine.
I'm Catherine Trujillo, and I'm the early childhood mental health reflective coach at the council as well.
And I'm Deb Benali, early childhood mental health consultant at the council.
Today we're going to talk about trauma, which is a really broad subject. So it's just going to be a snippet. So please, if you have any follow-up questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. And more likely than not, we will be having more trauma videos and PowerPoints to share with you all. Because like I said, trauma is a really broad subject, so there's no way we can cover it all, but hopefully with this video, you'll learn some new things and get a basic understanding of trauma with kiddos. Alrighty. So what is trauma? Trauma is a deeply distressing or disturbing experience. And so this can be either something that is perceived or actually experienced. And it's an emotional shock following a stressful event or physical injury, which may be associated with physical shock and sometimes leads to long-term neurosis. So trauma the word trauma can be different for every person because like I said, it can be a perceived thing, and everyone perceives events differently. So trauma cannot necessarily be defined. It can be a physical event, it can be an emotional thing. It's a pretty broad range, but it does have an impact on individuals in a wide variety as well. Here are some examples of what a trauma can be for a person. A death, in the family, in the community of a friend, someone they were close with, divorce, abuse, either physical, emotional, sexual, or a combination of those, natural disasters, or as we're experiencing now, the pandemic. Violence, it can include witnessing a parent being physically assaulted, which is domestic violence or interpersonal partner violence, exposure to gun violence, war, gang violence, and bullying. So again, a broad range of what violence, can mean. Um, moving, to a different community within the same state, moving different states, it can have on some people, adults or kids, moving can have, a big impact on them. Medical crisis, such as serious illness, major surgery, or an extended stay in a hospital. And this applies, both for adults and children. So neglect, which can either be a physical neglect, so not getting everything that you need physically, or emotional neglect. So not getting that emotional connection that, again, that adults and children both need. Growing up in poverty and growing up with a mentally ill parent, or in a household that has the parents have substance abuse. Um, so uh, yeah, so as you can see, there are a lot of things that qualify that can count as trauma. And again, it depends on the individual person and their perceived threat or, fear of threat. Um, so what does trauma look like? Um, And this can be in kiddos. So, anger and aggression, you see that often kids are acting out, whether it be not listening to directions, hitting, pushing, throwing things. It comes out a lot in these, outward anger and aggression impacts. Anxiety. So, in kids, anxiety can look, different depending on the kiddo, and you can also see withdrawal in certain kids, which could be depression as well. Difficulty trusting others, right, especially in the young kids who may have experienced trauma in their early years. They might not have that trusting relationship, and so they're going to have a hard time to attach and to trust other adults in their lives. Fear, so easily startled by loud noises, just fear about what may seem like unusual things, but it's stemming from something that they have experienced. And even for kids who are nonverbal, they experience trauma and have reactions to this trauma, and they are just not able to verbalize what they experienced. Even when they have language, if they experienced a trauma before they had the language, then they're not going to be able to tell you what happened, because that memory is formed in an emotional sense rather than in the language. So feelings of isolation, feeling that they have no one to turn to, feeling that they don't have support. Again, it goes back to difficulty in trusting others as well. Poor self-esteem, so being really hard on themselves, especially when they're young. And then self-destructive behavior, so that depending on the age can be harming oneself, or as if they're teens or adults, can be substance use, anything that's kind of detrimental to their physical bodies and themselves. So again, there's a really wide range, and kids and adults can have some of these symptoms or some of these behaviors, and not all of them. It's again really wide range of how kiddos and adults react to the trauma that they have experienced.
So, trauma's impact on brain development, and this is really, really important to pay attention to because it does change brain development. Exposure to chronic, prolonged traumatic experiences like sexual abuse, living in a home with a mentally ill parent, or substance abuse, chronic and long-term repeated pattern of behavior. These traumatic experiences have the potential to alter children's brains, which may cause longer-term effects in areas such as attachment. They have trouble developing relationships. They have trouble with boundaries, developing empathy where they can understand how another child feels, and social isolation. They may choose to isolate because it's easier than developing a relationship. Physical health, impaired sensory motor development, some coordination problems, increased medical problems, and as you age with chronic trauma, you have an increase for heart disease, an increase for diabetes. A lot of medical conditions tie into trauma's impact. And somatic symptoms, which are symptoms that are not necessarily real, but they're in our head. We believe they're real. Emotional regulation, difficulty identifying or labeling feelings, and communicating needs. That's very important, especially in early childhood, for children to be able to understand what anger looks like, what sadness looks like, what happiness looks like, and be able to identify those feelings. Dissociation, altered states of consciousness, amnesia, and impaired memory. Don't remember what happened, may have dissociated during the traumatic event, which means they kind of pulled away from inside themselves and witnessed it like they were looking at what's happening and not realizing that it's happening to me. That's dissociation. And just flat out, I don't remember what happened. Cognitive ability, problems with focus, with learning, processing new information, language development, planning and orientation to time and space. Self-concept, lack of consistent sense of self, body image issues, low self-esteem, shame and guilt. Did I cause this to happen? Even your little kids, did I cause this to happen? They think those thoughts. Are mommy and daddy fighting? Did I do something wrong? Behavioral control, difficulty controlling impulses, oppositional behavior, aggression, disrupted sleep and eating patterns, and trauma reenactment. Watch your children play. If they can sit down and play, they will reenact the trauma. They might reenact the fire, a hurricane that they may have lived through, someone's death, the police being called. Pay attention to what they're doing during their free play, and you'll have a good insight into what's going on with them trauma-wise. And what we're looking to build with anyone with trauma is resilience. We have resiliency when we are able to move forward in a healthy way. So what can we do to help? Build their bounce. Every day is a chance to build protective factors that promote resiliency in children. You want to build attachments and relationships by really listening, playing together, and just being there, consistently being there as a parent and as a teacher. Build initiative. We're actually going over the protective factors. So we're building initiative by celebrating the strengths that they have, exploring new things, offering challenges. Build self-regulation by naming feelings when they're happening, teaching skills that help them cope with what's happening, and offering choices. Attachment and relationships. Most people do not listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply. And that's a quote by Stephen Covey. Think about your conversations. Are you listening to understand, or are you listening to have a response? The 7 key active listening skills are: be attentive, have focus on what the child is saying, ask open-ended questions. Even if they're little, ask open-ended questions. Ask probing questions. They may not have the skills to answer you, but they're listening to you. If you need clarification, ask for it. If you're wanting to know what's going on with the child, ask the parents. Ask for clarification if there's a behavior that's come up that you just don't understand why. Repeat back what you hear so you have an understanding. It's called paraphrasing. Be attuned to and reflect feelings, because that's where trauma sits. It's sitting in the feelings. I mean, we hold trauma in all different parts of our body physically. You know, some people's stomach, other people back, but it's there. And when you're attuned to and are able to reflect the feelings of that person, you help to relieve the tension of the trauma. And then summarize what you've heard so you have an accurate understanding of what's happening. And if you're building and really working on the relationship, be attentive and play together. Okay, Catherine, it's all yours.
Thank you. So next, we're going to build initiative. What are your child's strengths? Talk about them, point them out, exploring new things together, and offering challenges. That are within reason to make sure that you're not causing stress by over challenging. So just to be aware of that. And self-regulation. And on the left here, we have a feelings chart. And this would be a good way to start naming your feelings and have a visual to go with that. Teaching coping skills. So coping strategies could be listening to music when you feel like you are out of control, drawing or coloring to relax, taking deep breaths. And that's something you could do together and practice. Take a walk, count to 10, take a break, and always offer choices. So two choices that are appropriate, but giving them options to really choose something that they want. And here are two books, The Resources, The Deepest Well, and Teacher's Guide to Trauma. So that's a little reading material. And as always, we have Deb, Francis, and my contact information. So any questions, if there's a specific topic that you'd like us to do a video on, or if you'd like us to go in more depth about certain aspects of trauma, we'd like to do that for you. And
Catherine, could I add something real quick?
Of course, Deb.
I wanted to just say there is a theory of trauma called the polyvagal theory. And one of the things that Dr. Porges talks about is regulation, self-regulation. And I just want to say that the more regulated we are, the more regulated you are as a teacher and a parent, the better regulated that child will be. We need to be the super regulators for our children. We need to provide them and show them how to regulate by being regulated. So, thank you.
No, that's a great point. Thank you for sharing that. Francis, did you have anything else or?
No, I think, like I said before, this is a really huge topic, and we could probably talk for hours and hours about so many different things. So, just starting small and figuring out, if you realize, like Deb said, we are the first person that needs to regulate. So if you realize you need to take some time and regulate yourself first, start there, and then build small strategies. Reach out to us if you need support with a certain kiddo, because trauma, this is where the challenging behaviors come from. We very often see the challenging behaviors because of what the kiddos have experienced, and they don't have the skills yet to self-regulate. So we hope that you learned a few strategies, or, just some general knowledge about how trauma can affect both kids and adults. And yes, we will, again, reach out if you have any questions or want different topics. We are here for all of you. All right. Bye. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.